of the New Orleans Saints ruled a tight end. That's the deal. That's the story. Chris, elaborate on it for us.
Well, let's go back again, as this has been kind of playing out over a long scenario. Is it going to be classified as a tight end or wide receiver? The difference in the tag numbers, $7 million for a tight end, $12 million for a receiver, so $5 million difference there. A lot of us thought, in the league, that it was going to be unlikely that they were going to rule it any other way than tight end. He was drafted at tight end. He goes to tight end meetings. He was voted in the Pro Bowl as a tight end. Certainly the snaps that he plays, 67%, is lined up from a detached tight end position. Doesn't mean, though, that a running back or a tight end can't be used in the passing game and can't be used in that respect. So remember, he's not lined up at wide receiver. He's lined up detached from the formation of tight end, so he's lined up as an inside receiver. So the whole thought was, what was the arbitrator, Stephen Burbank, going to rule? Well, he came down with the ruling. He ruled in favor of the Saints that he is classified as a tight end. What does that mean? Well, as we've talked about for a couple of weeks, I think a long-term deal is going to get done. The Saints have until, and Jimmy Sexton, the agent for Jimmy Graham, have until July 14th to get a long-term deal done. By that time, he will have to sign his tag on the 15th as a tight end. So, all this simply does, this ruling gives enough time, as we thought it would, give leverage to one side or the other. We now know it's to the Saints. I still expect Jimmy Graham to get an offer, as I've said for a few weeks, that's going to make him the highest paid tight end in the league. That currently is Rob Gronkowski at slightly under $10 million a year. I would expect that an average will come around 10 to 10.5 a year for Jimmy Graham. What this will do in getting a long-term deal, if they get it done, and again, I expect them to do it, it's going to alleviate some cap room. So instead of the Saints having a $7 million cap hit on him with the tag number, they can reduce that number and get him locked up long-term. So I expect them to do that. They don't want to go through this situation again next year. Of course, he is a big-time weapon. You want to call him a tight end, you want to label him this or that, he's a big-time weapon. He is the one that causes the most dictating of coverage issues for opposing defenses. So that's the ruling. Again, some may be surprised. I think it was probably headed that way all along. But all this is going to do is, I think, give the Saints a little bit of leverage and maybe making the deal a little friendly. But they're not going to shortchange the guy. He deserves to get paid very well. Does he deserve to get paid maybe with Calvin Johnson, the top receivers in the league? No, I don't think so. But does he deserve to be the top paid tight end in the league? I think that is fair. Another quick note. This is a big-time ruling, though, for other tight ends in the league. I think the signing is going to be big because with each signing, remember, a franchise tag is the average of the top 5 salaries. Again, every tight end makes $7 million a year except for Gronkowski. This will put 2 tight ends, when Jimmy gets his deal done, that's close to the $10 million mark. So this is going to increase the tag number for tight ends and leverage factor for a guy like a Julius Thomas, whose contract is up with the Broncos next year. So this has a far-ranging effects other than just the Saints, but to the tight end position as a whole in the league. So that's how I see it.
All right, I was wrong on radio and television. I thought the arbitrator would rule that he was a wide receiver. And my reason for thinking that was based on what I read in the collective bargaining, not that I read the agreement, but what I read about the agreement, where you line up, where you take the most snaps. It's been documented that he was not, butt to butt with the tackler, foot to foot on 67% of the snaps. So that was what led me to my conclusion. Again, it was wrong. But my question for you, Chris, is what does this do to the collective bargaining agreement thing about the snaps? I know this doesn't apply to all 22 players on the field. A quarterback's a quarterback, we know that. But you got defensive end linebacker differences. You got wide receiver, tight end differences, and everybody's taking note of this. And again, I'll further elaborate that I don't know that there's a true definition of tight end in the collective bargaining agreement that says this is what a tight end is. Maybe that's coming, but right now, so what does this do to the fact that he lined up not in what the traditional sense of a tight end is? He didn't line up in that position, but a third of the time.
Fair question, and it's not an easy answer because by definition, certainly he lines up more detached from the formation than he does in the formation. So by the letter of the law, it says, well, okay, that's where you lined up. But there's no rule that says that the running back or the tight end has to line up in a certain area, where you line. And I think, there needs to be clearer definition and not just, okay, because you can line up, the tight end, you line up in the backfield. If you use a tight end as an H-back a lot and you put him in the backfield, does it become more like a running back? Or, that becomes...
But again, it gets into the total number of snaps.
It gets a total number of the snaps, that's what I'm saying. But if you do that a lot, like Joe Gibbs there, you could have that. I think it needs to be more clearly written. I do think that we need to have more tags. I don't even think this is the biggest issue. The biggest issue we've had, we need to clarify, left tackles are different than right tackles or guards. And defensive ends and outside backers, well, depending if you're a 30 front or a 40 front, your outside backer is your defensive end like in the 40 front. So I think we need to look at it as designated pass rushers. We have to have accommodations for different fronts. I think they need to be more tags. And I think in this case, you can look at him and see he's a tight end. To me, what you asked me what he is, he's a tight end. He's just a tight end that is used in a variety of ways, which there's nothing wrong with that. Now, does that mean that he should be paid like the guy that's a third tackle on the line of scrimmage? No. It's common sense, and the Saints are not going to do that. I think if they do that, it's not going to be good for them or going forward. But I think, to answer your question, further clarification needs to be, because I see him as a tight end that catches the ball. I mean, what was Darren Sproles? I mean, he's more receiver, he's a running back, and how they use him. In today's game, with formation variations, we're going to have more and more of this, more tight ends that become bigger weapons. They're not wide receivers, they're not tight ends, they're inside receivers. And quite frankly, they need to be graded if we want to grade wide receivers with one tag, inside receivers, which are slot guys, tight ends who are detached from the formation. That side should be done. And then online guys are in a different category. We need more categories, pure and simple.
All right, now, so everybody says, what's next? Today, we're sitting here first part of July. July 15th, there's a deadline, if you will, of which that's the time the franchise tag would be applied and put into effect. You seem to think, you were telling me before we began the program, that the Saints and Graham will now make some type of a deal. Obviously, the ruling, as you said, gives a little leverage to the Saints because they don't have to get to the $12 million area. They're going to get somewhere in the middle. So you think a deal will get done between now and the 15th?
Yeah, well, let's just say the ruling was the receiver in $12 million a year. Well, now Jimmy Sexton's saying, well, why am I going to take less than $12 million a year? We'll just play for the tag. Well, now it's, $7 million a year. They're going to like that $10 million a year.
9.5 or the 10 or the 10.5.
And they're going to like that a lot better than they did yesterday. So that's why it's advantageous for him to do it. What can he do? His options are to agree to a long-term deal. The Saints are willing to give him one, which I think they are, or just to play the tag number this year and then become a free agent next year, which Saints won't tag him again. Too cost prohibitive because there's an extra percentage that goes up. Does he want to risk that? I think he's more than willing to become the highest paid tight end in the league. Why would the Saints do it? Same reason. He's a young guy. They want to lock him up long term. Do you want to just tag him and pay him $7 million this year for one more year and then likely lose him? Or do you want to get a deal that's going to put it in an average of $10 million, but with some bonuses that will take his cap number down from $7 million, which is what they bid if they have to tag him, and reduce that down for $3 or $4 million? That gives them some extra room to play with should they have to deal with injuries and whatnot, which you always have to. So it is a win-win for both sides to get a long-term deal. All this does, it kind of sets the standard for what the tag is going to be. I said there was a possibility of them getting a deal before the ruling. Well, there wasn't. Now we kind of know what the numbers are going to be. It's pretty simple, very little wiggle room. Why wouldn't you get a deal done? I think only hard heads would allow that. And again, I think it's risky for both. The Saints could lose him after next year if they don't get a long-term deal. And something bad, unfortunately, can happen to Jimmy Graham, which could, hurt him long-term. So it behooves both to get a deal done in a range that's going to make them the highest. But now, look, if the Saints come in and say, 8.5 a year, I could see Jimmy Graham saying, I'm going to take my chances and play it out next year. I think the Saints are going to come with a good deal, and in that 10 to 10.5 range, in that area, how the language is and which they're going to get this year, it's just what the average is going to be. I think it's just a win-win. It makes all the sense in the world. I expect it to be done. His options are to sign a long-term deal, or by the 15th, he has to sign the franchise tag. Now, if he doesn't, he has no other option. He's not playing for anybody. He has to sit out. Well, he's not going to sit out and give up the – he's not going to turn away from $7 million a year.
Well, and I said on the radio, if he plays football this year, it'll be for the New Orleans Saints. There's no possibility that he plays for anyone else. But you're right. If we get to the 15th and he does not have a deal in place and he chooses not to accept the franchise tag, he could sit out. Like you said, who's going to leave $7 million on the table?
No one ever
miss a year, and who knows?
No one ever sits out. I mean, money always wins.
Yeah.
$7
million versus zero.
Yeah, I mean, they always say we'll sit out, we'll sit out. Well, they're going to sit out until the weekly paychecks come in. Remember, off-season paychecks, they don't come in. They're very little money. They're training camp, per diems, basically. So when the first check, so they may sit out all that stuff, but then when the game checks start week 1, they all will manage to show up because the money always wins. There's no job that I'm aware of that he's going to go that's going to pay him $7 million a year outside of playing football. So he's going to play football, and he can only play for the Saints, and that's his option. But now we kind of know where it is, kind of put it to bed, so to speak. We knew kind of where it was heading. Now we know at least which path it's going to take, and he'll either agree to a long-term deal or he'll play on the tag. There's no third option, and I think it's going to be option A where he gets a long-term deal done by the 14th. We'll see how it plays out.